Today's story centers on a novelist who pulled heavily from her own life for inspiration. But as she would ultimately discover, some stories should never be written into reality. Before we dive in, if you enjoy unsettling true crime stories told in a cinematic, narrative style, make sure to tap the like button until it turns blue, subscribe to the channel, and enable notifications so you never miss a new upload. We share multiple stories every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. On the evening of June 1st, 2018, 68-year-old Nancy Crampton Brophy sat propped up in bed with her laptop balanced on her knees inside the Beaverton, Oregon home she shared with her husband. She was attempting to write her latest novel, but the words simply wouldn't come. Nancy was a romance novelist. Over the years, she had completed 11 books and collaborated on a blog with other local romance writers. Writing had always been her passion. It was what she loved most. The problem was, it never paid the bills. No traditional publisher had ever picked up her work. All 11 novels were self-published and largely available for free online. To support herself, Nancy had worked various jobs. She had once operated a catering business, but more recently she worked for Medicare. Still, she never gave up hope. She truly believed the next book would be the one, the bestseller that would finally make her financially secure and recognized as an author. But on this night, she was stuck. Unable to push forward with her manuscript, Nancy leaned back against her pillow and began thinking about her characters. When she struggled with plot direction, she often drew from her own life experiences. Her novels featured strong, independent women. Themes of love, resilience, fate, and freedom were woven throughout her stories, and they almost always ended happily. In many ways, Nancy felt she had her own happy ending. She and her husband, Dan Brophy, had been married for nearly 25 years. Both had been married before. Dan had a son and granddaughter from his previous relationship. Finding each other later in life felt, to Nancy, like destiny. They often referred to themselves as soulmates. They weren't perfect, they argued occasionally, but they understood one another deeply and gave each other room to pursue their own passions, something Nancy valued greatly. For Nancy, that meant long hours writing in the attic bedroom. For Dan, it meant cooking. Dan worked as a chef and instructor at the Oregon Culinary Institute. He was just as devoted to food as Nancy was to writing. When he wasn't in a classroom kitchen, he was tending to his chickens, gardening, or foraging for mushrooms in the Oregon woods. But beneath their seemingly idyllic life, financial pressure was building. Neither earned a large income. 2 years earlier, they had fallen behind on credit card payments. At one point, they couldn't cover their mortgage. Eventually, they pulled money from Dan's retirement account and made plans to sell their home and downsize. Nancy was actually optimistic about that. A smaller home could mean fewer expenses, and maybe she could finally quit her day job to write full-time. Still, the debt weighed heavily on them. That night, Dan came home late from a second job cooking at an assisted living facility. He'd taken it on to help ease their financial strain. When he walked through the door, he seemed especially irritable. Dan had always been blunt and socially rough around the edges. Some students had even complained about his strict standards. At a previous school, his demeanor had cost him his job. Nancy understood him. Others didn't. Still, she worried. What if he upset the wrong person? What if someone retaliated? Eventually, Dan made himself a late-night snack and, as always, fixed Nancy a plate too. That was his love language. They ate quietly. Shortly after, he went to bed. Just before 5 a.m. on June 2nd, Nancy woke to the sound of Dan moving around the house. He had a full day ahead, feeding chickens, preparing his classroom, teaching. Nancy couldn't fall back asleep. Her mind churned with anxiety about her stalled novel and their finances. Finally, she decided to take a drive, something she often did to work through plot problems. She headed into Portland, toward a beautiful neighborhood near Washington Park. Tree-lined streets, streetcar tracks, elegant homes. She envied that Dan got to commute through this area every day. But as she continued driving, she passed encampments of unhoused individuals, something that had grown increasingly common in Portland. Dan had recently started donating excess food from his school to a local church to help feed people in need. Nancy admired the gesture. Still, she worried about his safety. Then suddenly, clarity. A breakthrough for her book. She immediately turned around and drove home to write. For over 2 hours, she typed furiously. Then, around 10 a.m., her phone rang. It was one of Dan's colleagues. She sounded panicked. There had reportedly been a shooting at the Culinary Institute.
What is it?
Dan wasn't answering his phone.
Oh,
Nancy's heart dropped. She tried calling him. No answer. Texted. Nothing. She turned on the news. Helicopter footage showed police swarming the campus. Crime scene tape. Reporters everywhere. She rushed to the school. When she arrived, the scene was chaotic. Officers, flashing lights, media crews. She spotted colleagues of Dan's, but they avoided eye contact. Nancy approached an officer and identified herself. Moments later, homicide detectives stepped forward. Dan had been shot twice in a classroom kitchen. He was dead. The following weeks blurred together. There were no clear suspects, no usable security footage, no immediate motive. Nancy speculated that perhaps a disgruntled student or someone unstable had snapped. But while the investigation stalled, Nancy's life unraveled.
But the timeline is off.
She couldn't
We need
work.
to cross-check everything.
She couldn't write. She faced foreclosure after discovering her name wasn't on the house deed. She began selling possessions just to survive. Then, on September 5th, detectives returned. They told her there had been a major breakthrough. Years earlier, someone had written a chilling blog post titled, "How to Murder Your Husband." The post discussed planning, ruthlessness, and the idea that anyone could be driven to kill. The author? Nancy Crampton Brophy. Investigators discovered that Nancy had also purchased a gun and parts prior to Dan's death. Her financial struggles and potential life insurance payout gave prosecutors a clear motive. Her own words, her fascination with murder, were used against her. Nancy claimed the blog post had been purely fictional, creative writing. But a jury wasn't convinced. In 2022, Nancy Crampton Brophy was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The woman who built fictional worlds around powerful women committing murder had, in the end, written her own tragic final chapter. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know below.